probably the most popular way to avoid making a decision, have a meeting. Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about it. We'll not argue about it. Then we'll schedule another meeting to talk about it. And before you know, you've had 10 meetings and you still haven't made a definitive or decisive decision. And again, it gives you the feeling that you're doing something, but you're really not doing anything at all, which is really kind of sad. Decision time. Is decision making in organizations as weak and disorganized and as poor as we think it is? Let's decide. Well, I don't know. It could be. Maybe we should have a meeting to talk about it. Or maybe we could just kick the can down the road and talk about it next week. Hello, my name is Michael Dennison. I've dedicated my entire professional career helping organizations to high performance and be successful, as well as build strong and robust cultures. And this is the Work Trauma How Corporations Really Work podcast. On today's program, or today's episode, we're going to be talking about decision making, illusion, confusion, and delusion. That's right. Because you would think that decision making is really strong in organizations, like big organizations, which we generally talk about, would be really good at it. And some are, but many are not, or at least it's spotty at best. So when we talk about decision making in organizations, we need to look at two levels. So we're going to look at the executive level and see what goes on there. And there's a whole different power dynamic that goes on with the executive team and their intent to protect themselves and make sure they don't lose their jobs and they keep making the big bonuses. So I'm going to put that to the side. And first, we're going to look at basically decision making that it happens through the managerial level. So that's pretty much everything from the new supervisor or supervisors all the way to the director level. Okay. So again, you would figure that most organizations would have a very sophisticated approach to decision making. And the answer is it's not. In general, it's usually localized. Some departments are better making decisions because it's the nature of the department. Maybe they're heavily into analytics or whatnot, or they just have a strong leader. But there's so much core decision making going on or lack of decision making going on in organizations. And that's what we want to talk about today or on this episode. Right. So we have to look about the decision making process or why organizations or different managers or leaders want to avoid making decisions, right? There's this decision making avoidance. There's this tendency to not take on the tough decisions or kick it down the road. So why is that? Important to understand why. Well, the first thing might be because there's just a fear of making the wrong decision. And nobody wants to make the wrong decision, so we all understand that. But you got to make decisions in companies. But if you're fearful of making decisions, it means you're second guessing yourself. You're probably not going to make a right decision. Now, why would that be? One, there might be just a weak leader. That's how they're built. They haven't built up the strength or the process to make decisions. Or in companies, maybe there's punitive issues. You make one bad decision, your career's over. Well, if that's the culture in your company, I don't blame you for not wanting to make a definitive decision, right? So what happens generally with leaders who are avoiding making decisions? They're trying to figure out, what would my boss think? Will this please my boss? Is that what he or she wants me to do? I don't know. So it really should be, though, about what? What's the best decision? What's best for the organization? Not about how do I please the higher ups? Okay, but this happens all the time. Again, causing this kind of avoidance to make decisions. All right. Secondly, I would also say there's just a lack of process, a decision-making process in organizations, right? It should be shared. It should be taught that there's a basic approach to how we make decisions in organizations, right? Which includes some kind of process, some analytics, right? Something that helps you make it, as opposed to, I like this one, I like that one, which I see far too in organizations. So minimally, you do pros and cons. What's the best idea based on that? But you should be able to go deeper, particularly on the big, meaty decisions. So you need some kind of methodology or process in place. Again, great leaders, if the organization doesn't have it, will come and use their own process. It's probably tried and true for them. And again, there should be courses in this, and there are decision-making courses. Most of them aren't very good. We talked about the lack of good training available, but the reality is we want to make sure that you're trained up as a manager to make decisions. The last part about the avoidance, is about accountability. there's so many people now who are working to avoid accountability in organizations, right? They want to avoid accountability. So if I don't make decisions, I don't have to be accountable to it. Unless it's a slam dunk decision, then maybe I'll jump into it. But in reality, we want to make sure um, that we make good decisions and we own those decisions. And in reality, to be successful in life in general and at work, your decisions generally have to be more right than wrong. So you better be right most of the time than wrong most of the time. All right. So let's look at the top 10 reasons or ways, top 10 ways managers avoid or leaders avoid making decisions, or they make suboptimal decisions. Number one, this is a classic, right? Analysis paralysis, right? So this is the idea of like, I can't get enough information. More information is necessary to make the perfect decision. Well, we know no decision is ever perfect. They're usually better, right, or more correct than some of the other decisions. Once in a while, it's a very clear thing, but you want to be informed. But when there's so much information involved, it starts to clutter up or dilute decision-making process. Now, sometimes people get into the analysis paralysis issue with good intention. They just want more information. Never can be enough information. But again, it starts to paralyze your ability to make a decision. Other people will very deliberately and intentionally, oh, I need more data. I need more this. We need this. I don't know how this will work. And they do that as a way to actually avoid making the decision in the first place, which happens a lot, right? So great. All right, number two, top 10 ways. I think I have 12 though. Top 10 ways managers avoid making decisions or make poor decisions. Oh, a lot of times you'll see these managers lean on the opportunistic approach. I want to be opportunistic. Something's come up. I want to be ready for it. I want to be opportunistic, always looking for it, right? Being opportunistic as a way of making decisions is really bad. It's really by chance, right? Like we say, hope is not a strategy. So if you're just being purely opportunistic, man, you're not really making decisions. You're avoiding decisions, right? Now, listen, sometimes you can have a strategy to be opportunistic, but it should be very, very narrow and very, very time bound. But if your default is always I'll make decisions based on it being opportunistic, that means you're probably waiting till the last second. They're rushed decisions, and overall quality of decisions will not be good. It's just not going to be good. It's the nature of it. Again, another way to delay decision making. All right, probably the most popular way to avoid making a decision: have a meeting. Let's have a meeting. Let's talk about it. We'll talk about it. We'll argue about it. Then we'll schedule another meeting to talk about it. So the easiest way to avoid decision making, which we see all the time, is having a meeting about it. Then having another meeting, maybe a task force to supply the meeting with more information for the next time we meet. And before you know, you've had 10 meetings and you still haven't made a definitive or decisive decision. And again, it gives you the feeling that you're doing something, but you're really not doing anything at all, which is really kind of sad. Again, have a meeting, be clear what the process is about making the decision, go through the inputs at the end of the meeting, make sure you record the decision and move on. All right. Number four, uh, that would be make everybody responsible for the decision. If everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. So we see this a lot in organizations. Like, are we all in on this? We're in this together, right? We're in this together. Well, I don't know. It's your decision. Why do you want me on it? Because we have to be unified as a team and you hear all this stuff. So trying to make everybody responsible means nobody's responsible. Again, often the decision-making process or the decision-making is delayed because of this, because you're trying to get everybody in. Everybody's feeling good about it. Hey, it's your decision. Don't pin this on me. I don't want to be responsible for that. So let's stop. Let's stop. Have a meeting. Okay. All right. Number five. Feel like David Letterman here. Five, working for active consensus, which is related to the first one. Now you want consensus, right? But consensus doesn't mean everybody agrees 100% with everything. That's really hard to get in anything in life. It's hard to go to a restaurant to get that, particularly quickly, right? So, that's between me, and my wife. We have sometimes a hard time coming to consensus on what restaurant to go to. So think about building pure agreement. Now, consensus, depending how you define it, but really consensus is we all can live with this. We all are going to support this decision and we're going to move on. Maybe I like my other decision better, but we decided as a group to do this and now we're bought into it. We have consensus. This is the decision we made as a team. This is what we're deciding to support. So remember, consensus is different than total agreement. All right. Number 6, put on the lingering list. Oh, yeah, the parking lot. The parking lot is a great tool, right? You're having something, you're having an important discussion, and something really important comes up. You don't want it to kind of take you down a rabbit hole outside the discussion happening. So you put it on the parking list. And then it disappears into the nebulous, right? And it's never heard from again. And then it comes up every couple of meetings. And but really, it's kind of it's that lingering list. I meet so many companies that have this lingering list, and they just don't want to they don't want to deal with it for whatever reason. Maybe it's a tough decision, an uncomfortable decision, often a personnel decision because we don't want to be mean to people, but it kicks the can down the road in terms of decisions making. All right, number 7 about decisions that really can stall it or avoid it. Call it hands from the grave. So that means actually we made a decision at a meeting, and then 2 weeks later at that same meeting, the standing meeting, people are like, what are we going to do about it? Are you sure we made that decision? I'm not sure if do we make that. I'm not sure we totally agreed on that all. And you're like, I think we did. I thought we agreed on that. So a weak manager will get sucker punched with this one and like, what? I thought we agreed on it. And all of a sudden, hands from the grave. We're going back and we're relitigating the decision we already made. I see it happen all the time. It's usually by people who either don't like the decision, don't want to follow through on the decision, don't want to take responsibility for the decision. They'll keep obfuscating with hands from the grave, as we call it. Okay, happens all the time. So the best thing to do for that, of course, is when you make a decision, announce it, publish it, so people can't question it, unless something materially has changed. Right? There's new information that is very significant, is material. Then you could rethink the decision. But if nothing has happened, the decision's been made, you're moving on, you're moving forward. All right. Number 9. The quote, I think, Rush. By not making a decision, you made a decision. So decision by default, right? You kind of just hold out, you don't make a decision, and then it kind of just lands to kind of the easiest decision or probably what you were doing before you had to make a decision, particularly when it comes to change. It kind of defaults to something. So you got to understand decisions by default that just kind of happen to fall into place rarely are great decisions. Mostly are best mediocre decisions, but often can be bad decisions, right? So you understand by avoiding the decision, you're making a decision, just a really bad one. And you probably shouldn't be a leader and getting paid to be a leader if you're into the let's default uh, by it, by this decision, right? It just kind of happened. I don't know. Did we really make the decision? Now some people are doing it, and the decision really hasn't been made. All right. Number 10, why people avoid decision making. All right. Alan Toffler, who wrote a book years ago called Future Shock, very much a futurist, has done some really cool research. And this research is actually old now. I think it's 10 years old now. He came out and said that the average manager doesn't have the mental capacity, the brain capacity to decide or make as many decisions as they need to in any given day. That it's just too many decisions. The brain starts to kind of short out. You can't process all this information so quick. Therefore, you kind of start again avoiding the tough decisions. Oh, I'm too tired, right? I made so many decisions today. I'm worn out today. I will make sure. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Can we decide this at next meeting? And part of that is not because the person's lazy necessarily, right? Or doesn't like to make decisions, although I'm sure that's a part of it. It also has to do with our human physiology. So our physiology kind of prevents this. We're moving so fast, we're not making good decisions. And that happens all the time. All right, that's top 10. I got 2 bonus ones for you. Okay. Number 11, right? Choose the easiest answer, right? The easiest answer is one that's not going to rustle feathers. And the best example I can give of this is years ago, us facilitators facilitating strategy sessions would do the stupid thing where we would kind of list all the really great strategic ideas on a flip chart. We would discuss them, and then we'd hand out these little circle stickers, right? And you had 2, and you put a sticker on each of the idea you thought was the best. So you're kind of doing some kind of quasi voting on it, right? And so generally what you do, you kind of pick the most bold solution you thought that you like, put it there. And then your second one, you kind of go for the obvious, boring, mediocre solution, put it there. And everybody would do that, but everybody had a different idea what the best bold solution was. So the solution or the one that got chosen or was decided on by this official sticky sticker vote was usually the most mediocre idea. And you have to start all over again now. Some facilitators like myself have changed how we do that. We do it a very different way, so we don't end up there. But that happens all the time. Yeah, that's a pretty big one, strategic decision making. But a lot of times people just go for the easy answer that will not ruffle feathers. All right. Bonus 12, number 12. What's the easiest way to avoid decision making? Hire a consultant. That's it. Hire a consultant. Right. In the end of the 90s and the 2000s, there was a saying that went around, which was nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM. Okay. So my gosh, the easiest way to avoid decision making is just hire this consultant. And then why do we need you? We're paying you a lot of money. Now we're going to pay you a lot of money, and your whole main job is to hire somebody else for a lot of money. That's your job. No, your job is to make decisions. All right. Make sense so far? All right. And that's generally what happens at kind of the medium level, the leadership level, right? Before you get to the executive level. So think about that. All right. So what happens far too often at the executive level? Well, let's take a pause, dramatic pause. All right. So what happens at the, so I get all worked up about this. What happens at the executive level often? Not always, but often. So my premise is that executives in particular spend most of their time not serving the company, not serving the staff or the employees, not even going for the win. They spend most of their time protecting and preserving their title, their role, their job, their bonuses. So that's a very strong drive in so many executives today. Matter of fact, it's probably the deepest drive. You got this big payday, you got this big bonus, deferred comp, you got stock options, you got a company car, you got a jet. The bigger the better. I don't want to lose this. So all your decision making now comes from how don't I lose this, as opposed to what's best for the company. Well, we'll put the company in the best position. And we see this all the time. So decisions now, instead of being made in the best interest of the company, are now being made in what they perceive as the best interest of the executive, their bonus, their safety, their prestige. So we would see this. We would see this a lot. You would think that you couldn't get away with this, right? You would think you couldn't, but CEOs get away with it all the time because they're very good at deflecting responsibilities, right? That's why you see so many bad CEOs out there, right? And the other part of that too is you would think too there's a higher level of accountability with the CEO, and there's not, right? CEOs make bad decisions all the time, and the people who pay for it are generally the people who are beneath them, well beneath them in the hierarchy, right? So they make bad decisions and then they lay off people to cover for those bad decisions when they should really lay off themselves, or the board of directors should look at the CEO and said, the CEO said, this is our direction. This is my decision. And everybody else follows with that direction. And the company does bad, but the person who made the decision doesn't get in trouble for that. The people who followed through on doing what they were told, they're the one who pay that, and usually in rifts, reduction in force, right, and getting laid off. So it's really, 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 really sad, but it happens all the time. So just be aware of that. Decision making too. There's this kind of this epic legend that a lot of decisions are made on the golf course, and that's probably still true to some degree. I think there's some things that go on. More of the happier decisions happen like on things like a golf course. But it's kind of the big nitty gritty decisions, man. They happen within the inner circle, man. The inner of the inner circles, where man, it's closed doors. There are things going on, discussions happening, and again, they're not weighing what's best for the company. They're weighing about what's best for you, COO, for me, CEO, for the CFO, to kind of keep their jobs, to keep things going, and make the company look good, even if it means by kind of moving things around. Now you're not technically fudging with the numbers, but you're manipulating the system so the numbers look different, right? Because you could easily manipulate numbers, and this happens all the time. To get your bonus, you lay a bunch of people off at the end of the year. But this happens all the time in the inner circle. Hard to break into it, but just so you know, this happens. And again, these inner circles rarely. I'm sure there are companies who do this, but rarely are they going through, hey, what's our stringent process? What's the pros? What's the risk part of it? What's the timing part of it? What's the impact part of it? It's just kind of bunch of people sitting around drinking scotch, figuring out what's going to be best for them when they do this. All right. So let's go about this. By the way, it's a shame that it's this way. Um, it really is that decisions are made in this poor manner because it doesn't serve the employees. It really doesn't serve the company. It doesn't actually serve the stockholders or the shareholders in the end, right? So, a couple things to know about this about decision making. One is with all the great technology we have, we do have some great technology. We have great analytics and stuff. Technology will never replace good sound judgment. So you should always be developing in yourself as a leader, in your other direct reports and the other leaders in the organizations, good sound judgment and good decision making techniques for sure. Um, when it comes to being opportunistic as well, again, it's okay to be opportunistic, but in very narrow bands for very narrow amount of time, you can be opportunistic. So I just want to share that with you. All right, what's the solutions to this? What's the antidote to poor decision making? Right. Well, in general, one, the company should have good processes and training and development in decision making. That should really revolve around risk, which is like it's a high risk, low risk, medium risk, the impact on the organization or the market, high risk, low risk, medium risk. What's the timing on that? What's our capability in this area? What would happen? Worst case scenario, best case scenarios. Let's do some scenario planning. So companies should have this in place, and if they don't, they should start building it. Because what does a company do in essence, right? Company makes decisions. When I teach strategy, you know, it's fun, man. We have a lot of fun. But strategy, of course, is a word that doesn't mean anything because it means so many things now. Strategy is not visioning. Strategy in the end is making a decision about where you're going to spend your money, your time, your people, and your resources. Where are you going to put them? They're finite. So you're deciding where are you going to put them on. It's like being in Vegas and you have 5 chips. Where are you going to put those 5 chips? You don't have 100 chips. You have 5 chips. It's finite. So that's what strategy really is to me. It doesn't sound sexy. It's not as exciting as a visionary stuff. But in the end, it's what makes companies make it or break it. So really, companies should have very clear decision making ability, capability, and process in place to do that. All right. What else about decision making that would be a good solution? Document decisions and share them and keep them in a share folder, right? So if you're in a meeting, you make a decision at the very end of the meeting, you should review the key points of that meeting, particularly if there were any decisions made, right? Proclaim it. This is the decision we made. Therefore, you can't do hands from the grave. Therefore, people can't say, "Well, I didn't know. Did we sure we made it? I didn't know that we'd actually made the decision. I thought we were discussing it still." Happens all the time. And also, I would put in a shared document, in a shared drive where people can, they were wondering about what decision was made about such and such, it was there. All right. What else you want to do in organizations? You want to push down decision making. So you want to teach it. You want to get all your managers all the way down to supervisors good at making decisions, right? So you teach people, give them opportunities to decide. As a leader with your direct reports, you don't always have to have all the answers. Even if you know the answer already, really coach them to come up to the answer themselves. One, it'll help out with their decision making skills. Two, people are more likely to follow through on their decision if they come up with it themselves. So we have plenty of science that talks about that. A simple way to do this, particularly if you have more junior staff and they're learning this decision making process, always have them come to you with 3 possible solutions, right? Say, listen, you brought to me this issue. We have to make a decision what we're going to do about it. Come to me, your manager, your boss, with 3 options, with the pros and cons for each, as well as your recommendation. I might not take your recommendation because I might have some information that you don't know that's not appropriate for you to know. But I want you to think this through because one, it helps me get there quicker. It helps really clear the air and what's really at stake, and then we can make this decision, right? And also, again, you're pushing down this skill for good decision making. All right, what else can you do? Well, what's important about decisions, you can just track them. Maybe it was the wrong decision or it was the right decision or needs to be tweaked. This is the old, you know, uh, plan, do, check, act, right? It's very Drucker. So how do we check it? Do we talk about it? Do we see how it's going? Right. So I always like to tell people, you can't course correct if you don't have a course. So you set your course, right? Once you get your course going, hey, are we off course? Are we on course? Is it working? Is it not working? and you make the necessary changes to it to keep it on course. Or you could do something called prototyping. It's great to prototype. You could prototype anything, not just a particular uh, inanimate object, but a process or a new idea. So what you do is say, hey, for the next 3 months, we're going to try this out. You know, at 3 months, we're going to see if it's working, if it's not working, if it's going to be should be tweaked and it'll work even better. And that's what you can do. You say it's a prototype. We're not making a decision about it. We are deciding to try it out and give it a good college try and see if it works for us. So I think that's a good way to do that. Other things, yeah, man. If you're a leader, you have to have broad shoulders. So if you make a decision, own it, and make the call. Okay, because a good decision made today is better than perfect decision that's never made tomorrow. So own it, make the call. Again, you got to be right way more than you're wrong, but own it. Okay, it's a part of it, and you're gonna stub your toe. You're gonna make mistakes. And if you're in an organization where if you make one mistake, basic mistake, and they're going to fire you, you probably don't want to work there. Now, if you make an egregious mistake, well, that's a little bit different. But don't make an egregious mistake. If you're thinking through the process, you probably won't. Okay. And again, as a leader, make sure you're not punishing people below you who make mistakes as well. Remember, nobody's 100% of the time. Okay. So don't put that on yourself. Don't put that on other people. Again, make sure you're tracking the process for decision making. There's been a lot of bad decisions made in business, and still the business goes on, right? So let's look at New Coke in the '80s. Not a great decision. Company went on. Maybe some heads rolled. I don't think so. But again, so no one's right all the time. You got to be right most of the time. The more you embrace the decision making process and decision making in general, the better you're going to be at it. And then do the plan, do, check, act, meaning check the decision if it works, if it's working, if it's not working, if it needs to be tweaked. And I always keep this in mind, the Turkish proverb, no matter how long down the wrong road, turn around. So if you made a bad decision, admit it, right? It's a sunk cost, move on, fix it, and do something different. Okay. It's never just going to magically get better. And so just don't go down that road. Well, I made a decision. I'm sticking with it. I'm going to white knuckle through it. Right. Down the wrong road. Again, make the decision to stop doing that. And you're going to have to do something else. And we have to eat a little crow. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Yes. But it's better than letting that bad decision play all the way out. Then you'll definitely be out the door, if you will. All right. We talked about the opportunistic solutions as well. Remember, it's going to be opportunistic, limited time, very intentional for a finite area, a very narrow pathway. And you'll be okay with that. But that cannot be your go-to as a leader. And, what separates, to end this, I'd like to end this on this. What separates, really good, successful people in business, what separates the really great companies from the bad companies, one of the key ingredients to this is the decisions they make. And it really makes sense when you break it down. It's very practical. If you constantly are making generally really smart and good decisions with, a stub of the toe here and there, you're going to be highly successful as a company, as a person. If you constantly avoid making decisions or make bad decisions, life's going to be really hard and you're not going to be as successful. So that's my take on, I believe it was decision making, illusions, confusions, and delusions. I'm Michael Dennison for Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks much.